One of my friends knew about this discussed cabin in the woods. It was built on the edge of a river, on a kind of a sandbank. There had been a decline in the popularity of hiking and outdoors activities in the area due to a tragedy. It was practically deserted. So, me and 4 other friends, we seized the opportunity. We planned to go and hike in that area. We thought that we could use it if no one else was. When night fell, it was truly pitch black out there. You couldn't see your surroundings. It was a great night to be out in the wild. Me, I loved the natural ambience. There was the constant trickle of the river, mixed with the trill of insects. We heard what we thought was the sound of fingers drumming on the window pane. There was a nearby willow tree, so we assumed it must be the sound of a branch or something being dragged by the wind against the window. The lights were off early that night. We were all tired from the hike. Most of us were asleep in our own spots. It creaked now and then. There was the noise of people rolling over in their sleep. And, of course, with 5 men in there was definitely some snoring. But, other than those noises, it was a quiet night. We were miles from any city town or main roads. I couldn't sleep though. I was tossing and turning all night. We hiked and slept outdoors all the time. I don't know why I couldn't get to sleep that night. I had this unpleasant feeling in the pit of my stomach. I constantly felt like something was about to happen. I quickly found out what was causing my unease. The sound of the willow tree colliding with the window. It was getting louder. I listened closely and focused on the sound. It sounded to me like it was hitting different parts of the window. And then, it sounded like it was coming from the other window. There were 2 windows on the cabin, but they were at opposite ends to one another. I didn't remember there being trees outside of each window. I felt my stomach tighten with that realization. There was some kind of regularity to the sound as well. It didn't match the gusts of wind anymore. It was a steady, tapping sound now. It was no longer the sound of branches dragging. It sounded deliberate. It was circling. The sound of those taps and knocks was circling the cabin. I sat up to try and identify the source of the sound. I couldn't place it because the cabin was not at ground level. I couldn't look out from the window from my sleeping bag. I needed to open the door. I knew that I would not be able to sleep unless I checked this out. I tiptoed over so as not to wake the others. I was still thinking I was being paranoid at this point, and I didn't see the sense in waking up my friends with nothing confirmed. I slowly opened the cabin door with impeccably bad timing. For as soon as I opened that door, I came into contact with the source of this circling tapping. There was a young woman with long, messy dark hair grinning at me. She was barefoot and wearing a nightgown. She was covered in mud. I screamed to my friends to wake up, and they did. She'd been tapping the windows, and she was just standing there, smiling at me. I instinctively shut the door, but we really had no other choice but to wait until morning. We had no cell reception in the cabin. We couldn't call the police. We later found out that this young woman was the daughter of the owner of the land that we happened to be trespassing on. and she had done this before. I started to think back to that tragedy that happened around here. I think it was a missing person case or something. I wondered if she was something to do with it. I think we had a close call that night. She didn't know how she got there, apparently. Her feet were so cut up that there was blood in the muddy puddles she'd created by circling the cabin. I don't know how long she'd been circling us, and what might have happened if I didn't get up to check. I heard this story from one of my mountain climbing friends. He is really into mountain climbing, and he has climbed and conquered many in his time. I am also part of the same club as he is. He told me about this one climb he did, where he had to pay at the parking spot a kind of toll to climb. He said the guy who he paid took down his address and information in case of an emergency. He arrived at 8 a.m, which is way later than usual for him. He was climbing alone that day, and he was preparing himself. The elevation was high, but since he knew that he would be starting late, he decided before arriving that he'd spend the night at the summit. The guy who took payment from him told him that there was an unmanned cabin up there, which he would be more than welcome to use. He liked that idea more than his tent. He felt like, because of that, he could really take his time and enjoy the experience. He climbed to the summit without incident and took in all the gorgeous views. He was the only one at the summit, and the cabin was empty. He brewed some coffee, looked out over the mountains at nature's splendor, and watched the sunset as evening arrived. It began to get darker and chillier, so he headed into the cabin. He brought some alcohol with him and had a little drink while preparing dinner and listening to the radio. He was understandably very tired after dinner, so he decided to head to bed and get some sleep so that he could start his descent early in the morning. He turned off the lantern and the cabin was plunged into darkness. He said he had had no issue falling asleep due to how tired he was. In the middle of the night, he awoke to a strange sound. It sounded like the door was rattling. It spooked him a bit, because when he checked the weather forecast, it did not seem like it was going to be a particularly windy night. He listened closely to the sound, and he soon realized it was not the sound of the wind. It was something else. It sounded to him like the sound of someone trying to open the door, and the sound of people walking around. You know when you're in the dark and you're groping for something, like the door handle? He said it sounded just like that. A quick look at his watch told him that it was way past 2 a.m. He didn't think that another climber would be attempting the mountain at this time of night, especially not in the dark. Could there really be someone out there that late? I know that some mountains are connected by ranges, and you can hike or climb from one to another. But this mountain, it wasn't like that. For one, you needed to pay the toll at the parking lot. And secondly, there wasn't another mountain in the area. There was just one mountain with one climbing route. So, he said based on what he knew and his experience, there should be no one out there. He said it was impossible. That terrified him. He lay in his sleeping bag, shaking. He could not summon the courage to leave it. He pretended to be asleep, but kept his eyes slightly open, waiting and hoping that the noise from outside the cabin door would stop or go away. His hopes were not answered. After a few moments, he heard the sound of the door creaking open. That sound was deafening. He said he was praying deep within his heart when he heard that sound. Sweat had begun to amass on his brow, and his shaking showed no sign of subsiding. He opened his eyes slightly wider, and he said that he saw 4 figures by the door, illuminated by the light of a shadowy moon. A boy, a girl, a man, and a woman. They were wearing tattered and torn clothing. They carried no flashlights or lanterns with them. They seemed to be completely used to the dark. They entered the cabin. My friend closed his eyes and prayed that they'd go away. He was terrified of this family. They defied all the logic he put his faith into. There was no way that they could be there. Yet, they were there. And now, they were in the cabin with him. He heard footsteps creeping around the wooden flooring. They appeared to be looking for something. Agonizing seconds crawled by. My friend stayed as still as he could, so as not to alert them. Then, just as quickly as they had arrived, they left without conversation and without closing the cabin door. He said that as soon as he saw them go, he lost consciousness. I think he fainted because of fear. As soon as he awoke, he hurriedly threw all of his things into his bag and began his descent. I am not sure if he checked if anything was missing or not, but that would have been one of the first things that I would have done. He got dressed and quickly prepped for the descent. He went down the mountain as fast as he could. He was still terrified by his nightly visitors. He didn't want to see them in the day. There was something about that family that terrified him. When he got to the bottom, he spoke to the man at the toll booth, and he told him of his experience. He said it wouldn't have been right not to mention what happened. He didn't care if that made him look dumb or scared. The toll booth guy told him that he was the only one on the mountain that night, and that disturbed him. He wondered if he was visited by spirits. The toll booth guy then said that a few months back, a family went missing on that mountain. No sign of them had ever been found. Was it their spirits visiting him? Or was the family still alive? I wonder if they were looking for some food or something and were drawn to the hut. Perhaps something happened to them and they have memory loss or something. I don't know. My friend is convinced that the family that visited the cabin were indeed spirits. He will never forget that night. In all his climbs and hikes, he has never experienced the paranormal again.